Hi, I'm Tim Selesky on Digital Woodworking. I'm a contributing editor to Popular Woodworking magazine, and I have a blog called woodworking.digital. Today, we're going to talk about measuring and the precision instruments that we use to do woodworking. And this is relevant to all kinds of woodworkers. If you're a hand tool woodworker, a hybrid or a power tool woodworker, or a digital woodworker, you need tools to help you do this job. So let's get started. One of the most important things you could do as a woodworker is to establish some kind of standards in your shop for measuring. In other words, you can't really have this ruler that's a good ruler and that ruler that's not a good ruler, or this tape that's pretty good and the other tape that's really good. What you need to do is start with a set of standards. And one of the best places to do that is to buy a combination square. This happens to be one from Starrett that I bought over 20 years ago. I use this not just for its functional use. It's obviously I could slide it along and sit it anywhere I like, but it's also the standard to which I test all my other measuring tools as well. For example, any tape measure that I buy, I actually take this ruler, or one of the larger ones that I have, into the place that I'm purchasing tapes, and I validate and test every single tape that I get. You'd be surprised how off tape measures can be. And the second tool that I bought was a smaller version here. And this has turned out to be the most used measuring tool that I have in the shop. This sits in my apron pocket right here, and I use it every day and all day for pretty much everything. From a setup to where everything is perfectly 90 degrees here, like on a joiner or a table saw blade, and maybe as an offset that you're doing in order to score a line somewhere else. These tools are invaluable. But the real value, like I said, comes in their accuracy. That's the real investment. And I really encourage you to look at a set of Starrett or other high quality instruments. And it's worth paying for there, because everything else you use has to compare to something. You might as well start with something at a very high level. Now, some people don't like these small combination squares. Another way to go is these little 4-inch double squares. They're a little smaller, a little more convenient. They fit into a smaller pocket. So the next tools that I use the most is this little 6-inch Pec ruler that sits right in my apron pocket up here. This particular one here happens to be set up in tenths of an inch on one side, and the other is fractions of an inch on the other side. Use it all the time. And again, sometimes it's set up, sometimes it's testing. And when I need something a little bit better and stiffer, I use a thick version more or less of the same ruler, a little bit bigger. And I also keep around one of these. This is white over black instead of black over silver, or whatever the finish is. And what this is, it's a metric ruler. In order to see the difference between the two and not grab the wrong ruler, that's one of the reasons why I picked these out, to be a little bit different. I use a lot of squares in woodworking. Everybody does. When I started out, I actually bought some of those really nice brass and wood squares that are beautiful. You find them in woodworking stores, and well, they're just terrific. But one day there was a different kind of a square that came up on a sale, and I bought it just out of a fluke. And it's one of this style here. They're Swedish made, and they set at different angles. Now, it's easy to think that since they're adjustable, they're not accurate. But when I got this first one home, I set it up and matched it against my Starrett square, and I was shocked to find out that it was dead on. I was really amazed. And I got pretty enthusiastic about it because, first of all, they're portable. You can stick them in an apron pocket. They don't take up a lot of room on a table or anywhere you leave it. But they're just really flexible. So in the end, I end up buying several others. So I have one here that's 14 inches long, and then I have a little 6-inch one. They work out really well. The next tools that everybody should purchase is, first of all, is a high quality ruler. Now, I have rulers that go from 12 inches all the way to 6 feet, but the one I use the most is one that's only 2 foot long. It's very thick. In fact, this style is designed to fit inside of one of these combination squares. It's got a little notch right here in the center. But I like it for its thickness. On one side, I have it in standard what's called a 4R configuration, which is like 16ths on one side and 32nds on the other. Then if you flip the ruler over, I've been migrating lately to a ruler style called 5R. And what that is is it's tenths and hundredths of an inch. That may not seem like it would work for everybody, but because of digital woodworking, because I work in CAD all the time, I find myself frequently using fractions of an inches. So I might go 5.35 inches instead of putting in 5 3/8 at 5.375. It's just a little easier to measure. So anyway, there's something to think about particularly if you get into digital woodworking. It just simplifies things to be in base 10. The next, and frankly the most used tool in the shop, is a tape measure. Well, they may be simple, but one of the problems with tape measures is most of them are very, very inaccurate. I really want my tape measures to be dead on, as accurate as I can get out of a Starrett ruler or any of my other tools that I trust. So I actually end up taking this ruler or a longer one, and when I go into a home improvement store or a woodworking store of some type to buy tapes, I take the ruler and I use it to test. So I will test every ruler I can find until I find ones that the lines line up absolutely perfectly on the ruler. Then I'll push it in and also do that test as well. Now, tape measures I've found over the years to be very difficult to find good ones. In the last few years, I've settled on this particular model and this particular type of tape. It's made by Tajima. This model suits my needs, and it's a 5-meter, 16-foot combo. On one side over here, it's inches, on the other side, it's metric. With CNC and digital woodworking, I find myself kind of walking that line between metric and imperial, and so it's very handy. The other thing is this ruler is an inch wide instead of 3/4, which helps it in terms of standout, in terms of the distance you could hold it out here before it bends. And it has very fine graduations. I really like it. But a couple of the features that make this particular tape measure stand out is, first of all, the color. As things pile up in a shop, you set a tape measure down, you can't find it. I like my tape measures to be bright colors. The next thing is a locking thumb nut. I use all kinds of spring-held things, and I've never had one work out. With this, you press it, it's locked, as simple as that. But the third feature is something that I ran across with another maker, is down here. And what this is, it's a little cushion stop. So when the tape flies in, it has a cushion. And this explains why the fact that these tape measures don't wear out. My normal tape measure lifespan in my shop is maybe 6 months to a year at best. But ever since I started buying tape measures with this, they don't seem to wear out. Another little detail is there's 4 rivets in the hook down here, and the hook design is very stiff. Anyway, these work out really well. They come in other configurations. Well, most of the instruments on this side are the ones that most woodworkers are familiar with. Certainly rulers and squares and adjustable combination squares and such. Everything on this side is a little more toward the precise side. Now, some of these are going to be very relevant to all woodworkers, but certainly most of these are more relevant to people doing a little more precise digital woodworking. But before I go on, I want to point out a little bit about precision. Now, the thing is if you're a furniture maker, you should be striving to make sure that all your measurements are maybe a 64th of an inch accurate. You really want to cut everything just right, because otherwise it's going to come back and bite you at some point. Now, a 64th of an inch is 0.0156, I believe, of an inch, and that's pretty accurate. So these tools over here can really help you achieve that. So let's go through these. Now, I have a whole assortment here of different types of what are referred to as calipers. Now, calipers, as you could see here, are designed to measure like the thickness or some sort of fairly small width. Now, for a long time, what I used for calipers is I would go out and buy these incredibly inexpensive digital calipers. In fact, I have some right back here. This little collection represents maybe about 1/3 of the ones that I burned through in the last, say, 15 years. They're very cheap, they're digital, and they fail constantly. They also chew up batteries at an alarming rate. So a little while ago, I decided to get really serious about it and decided to get a better calipers. And what I ended up with is a couple of different brands. I did a lot of testing. I was originally going to go out and buy a Mitutoyo caliper, but I found that there are other calipers out there that work either equally well or in some cases a little bit better. And these are the two main results. So this is a Clockwise Caliper, and it's to 4 digits, and so it's accurate to 0.0005, a half of a thousandth of an inch. And I love the fact that it has this big screen. It has other features as well. If you click this button, you can go in between metric or fractions. So if I pull it out here, you can see it's metric, and then there's fractions of an inch. Here we go, 19/128, pretty precise. And I really love this particular one. So much so that I went out and I bought a 12-inch one as well. I use the 12-inch to do certain kind of measurements when I do testing, and I do make some things that are fairly small, and it really is helpful for that. Very nice. Anyway, Clockwise, definitely something that's worth looking at. The second caliper that I found I really like is made by a company called iGaging, and this is a special kind of caliper. It's what's called an absolute caliper, and so it remembers where 0 is. Now, the way all these other digital calipers work, before you start a measurement, you should really go all the way down to 0 and then start over again. Each time you do the measurement, you should re-zero. And this particular style is called an origin style caliper, remembers where 0 it is. Mitutoyo does this as well, and iGaging does this particular unit, and it works really, really well. I think this one is actually a tiny bit more accurate even than the Clockwise, but still the accuracy is at a level that's more than good enough for any kind of woodworking. Anyway, the iGaging and the Clockwise are two excellent ones. And when I'm teaching, I ask that all students bring some sort of digital or dial caliper to a class. I get a lot of people saying which one to get. Well, I recommend these two, but typically you'll probably have to order them online. But one that's commonly available is made by Husky, which is Home Depot brand. And it's not quite as accurate as the iGaging or the Clockwise, but it works pretty well. But it comes with something that almost no other caliper comes with, and that is a lifetime warranty. It doesn't seem to use batteries up very much, which is very important, and it works pretty well. It's certainly not too bad. These are about $30. Since I brought that subject up, the Clockwise are around 20 or so. Excuse me. The iGaging calipers are $30 to $40 depending on the model. For those that prefer dial calipers, Mitutoyo is certainly the place to go, or Canon from Japan, or one of these. This is a Brown and Sharp dial caliper, and it is just a beautifully made tool. It works extremely well. You could just tell from the machining just how really nice it works. But as much as I like dial calipers, which are wonderful in terms of doing comparisons and such, one problem is it's possible to get dust inside the gears in here, and thus it may not work quite as well. But if you want to find a good dial caliper, Mitutoyo, Brown and Sharp are a couple of the good ones. I have a Brown and Sharp veneer caliper, and what you do is you compare these different marks on these gauge points against your measurements here, and when you find one in line, you take that amount and add it to the distance that's indicated down here. And a lot of old-time machinists swear by these, and it's easy to understand why. They're incredibly accurate, but they're very hard to read. I have to get my best reading glasses out to use one of these. Now, this one here I bought on a whim just to kind of show you, and this is what happens when you make one out of plastic. At least they don't guarantee that it's anything too terribly sharp, but I'm sure you could probably get to 0.005 accuracy or 0.010 accuracy. But these are the kind of ones that you'll find in a home improvement store for $20, $30. Next tools I have here is a couple of squares, and these are from Connex, which is a Czechoslovakian company that specializes in these kind of tools. I use these to actually test my sterrets in case I drop one. These are accurate to 0.0007 of a degree accuracy. They're pretty amazing, but they're kind of nice to have around on occasion. So upping everything one more notch, and then you get into micrometers. This is a digital micrometer. It works really well. Now the difference between a micrometer and one of these, of course, is the openings are much bigger. These all open to about 6 inches, and the one back here to 12. This is only to 1 inch. And where I use this is to measure the bits and the mills that I use on my CNC machine. They may say 1/2 inch, but I have run across very few that are actually 1/2 inch. I use these to validate and measure all the bits that I have in my shop, and that way when I use it on a CNC, I'll get the results that I want. Now, traditionally, you have a handheld screw thread type micrometer, and these work really well too. But the digital ones certainly make life easy. Now, the last things I have back in here, this is a dial indicator. You can see as I move it here, it's on a stand that's adjustable to all kinds of little positions and such. Now, how is this relevant to woodworking? Well, frankly, I don't know how you could set up a table saw super accurately without one of these. These are very handy. The same is true, with setting up a joiner or a planer and stuff. This precision allows you to really test things. And having one of these little stands, and this is magnetic, make it really useful. The other thing that I use quite a bit is, this happens to be a magnetic holder for a dial indicator that you would lock into here like this. And this I use on the table saw when I'm trying to dial in a width that I'm cutting. So I set this and clip this onto the back rail of my table saw with a dial indicator pointing at the fence. And as I adjust the fence, I can see the differences showing up on the dial indicator as it moves. And this way I can get everything really dialed in. I also use these on my planer in order to get all my accuracy just right. I'll use one of these type of tools to measure my wood, and I find like I need to take off 2/1000ths of an inch or 3/1000ths or whatever. I find that I may need to take off a few thousandths of an inch, and then I simply make that adjustment, and I see it show up on the dial indicator as I move the planer up and down. I also use these on my wide belt sander. Very handy. So a combination of a magnetic base and a dial indicator of some type. The last one over here is really mostly useful on a CNC. This is another form of dial indicator, and what it does, it allows me to sweep across a surface to look for imperfections. So with all of that in mind, let's talk about what tools are relevant and which ones make most sense for woodworkers. I think if you're a woodworker and you plan on working accurately, first of all, you really want to get a really great combination square. Preferably two, a small one and a big one, or one of these double squares. The other thing is some sort of larger square in order to make perfect 90-degree lines on something that you're making. Certainly all woodworkers should invest in a great ruler or two, whether it's 12 inches or 18 or 24 like this, and maybe a couple of longer ones. Like I said, I have rulers all the way up to 6 feet and straight edges to 6 feet. But certainly tape measures. Invest in quality tape measures and validate every tape. I would recommend that every woodworker considering get a caliper, whether it's digital or a dial caliper. The reason is you can measure width and judge the thickness of the wood that you're cutting. But it's also relevant to joinery. It allows you to measure, the width of a tenon. And if you find that it's a little bit thick in whatever form that you're cutting that tenon, it tells you how much to cut it off. You could also, using the offset, measure the shoulders of a tenon. It really helps to have one of these. I really do recommend that you get some form of a caliper, whether it's digital or a dial. The other thing is I think if you use any kind of power tools, some sort of dial indicator set is very useful. Now, if you're using digital tools like a CNC, certainly you need to up the game a little bit. It's really good to have something that's very accurate in terms of squares so you could judge the position of your spindle and make sure that it's all set up right. And it really helps a lot to have a micrometer to measure your bits or the accurate thickness of some piece that you're milling down. So with that said, that's the end of this introduction to precision instruments for woodworkers. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. And again, this is Tim Selesky. We'll see you later on. Thank you.